The Creature in the Pumpkin, a Halloween spooktacular of fun and otherworldly friendship.
Chapter 1. The Halloween Discovery. A chill wind threaded through the cul-de-sac, rattling branches and sending dry leaves skittering like skeletal fingers across the cracked pavement. Jack Coleman pulled his coat a little tighter, feeling a prickle of unease despite the cheerful glow of jack-o'-lanterns lining the neighborhood porches. It was the perfect Halloween night. Dark, crisp, with just enough moonlight to make the shadows dance. "Come on, Dad, you're gonna miss all the good candy." Lucy's words boomed out, muffled by her vampire fangs. Her cloak flared widely as she hurried up the porch steps. Ben adjusted his astronaut helmet next to her, gave Jack a thumbs up, and stumbled after his sister. Jack chuckled as he shook his own candy bucket, a brilliant orange pumpkin with a little flashlight inside. The candies shook, putting an unusual shine on the etched eyeballs. All right. Slow down just a bit, will you?" Jack called, following them down the sidewalk. But as he took a step forward, but stopped abruptly, a thick, matted tuft of fur lay on the sidewalk. Ben, however, barreled on, tripping over it with a surprised yelp. His candy bucket hit the ground, spilling treats across the pavement as it rolled over to a hedge. Jack reached out to steady Ben, patting him on the shoulder. "Hey, buddy, you all right?" I think so," Ben stammered, his face flushed with embarrassment. He pointed at the furry lump on the ground. "I tripped over that. What is it?" Jack squinted down at the dark, fuzzy shape. It looked like a large Halloween decoration, maybe a fake animal or a bundle of fur someone had left as a prank. But something about it seemed off. He felt a strange chill creep up his spine. "Ben, your pumpkin," Lucy whispered, pointing. The bucket had rolled to the edge of a nearby bush. The bucket seemed to rock back and forth, making Ben pause. Just a trick of the wind, he told himself, but as he reached for it, the bucket moved again. This time, there was no mistaking it. Something was moving inside. Jack noticed the movement too, and told Ben to step back as he cautiously lifted the bucket up. As they all peered in, a pair of enormous glowing eyes blinked up at him from inside the pumpkin, framed by wisps of dark, silvery fur. The creature, no bigger than a kitten, was curled up in the bottom of the bucket, clutching a tiny metallic device that pulsed softly with a blue-green light. Its face was round, expressive, almost childlike, with wide eyes that shimmered with a mixture of fear and intelligence. "Whoa!" Ben breathed, leaning closer. "What is that?" Jack didn't answer. He was too transfixed by the creature's eyes, which seemed to plead with him in a silent language. It made a soft, melodic chirp, pressing its tiny hands, paws, against the side of the bucket, as if trying to climb out. Jack instinctively reached to help, but the creature shook its head, clutching the device tighter, its gaze darting toward the shadows under the trees nearby. "Dad," Lucy whispered, her voice tinged with awe and a hint of fear. "I think it's scared." The creature chirped again, more urgently, raising its tiny hand to point toward the distant tree line. Beyond the rows of houses, Jack noticed a faint, eerie glow pulsing in the darkness. A steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. The creature glanced over its shoulder, trembling, then looked back up at Jack, its expression a mixture of desperation and silent pleading. "Dad, is it lost?" Ben asked, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. Jack murmured, still struggling to understand what he was looking at. But one thing was certain. Whatever this creature was, it needed to get back to that glow. The fear in its eyes was unmistakable, an urgency that cut through Jack's rational mind like a knife. He could feel it. Whatever it was afraid of was getting closer, lurking just beyond the edge of their vision. "Kids, I think it wants us to take it back, wherever it came from." Jack's voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking any louder might shatter the strange spell surrounding them. The creature nodded, clinging to the device, which pulsed faster now, casting an otherworldly glow inside the pumpkin. Jack thought that it was almost acting like a beacon, a distress signal of some kind. Lucy took a step closer, her face lit with both fear and excitement. "Dad, we can't just leave it here. What if it's in danger?" The creature's chirping grew frantic, its eyes widening as it pointed to the trees. Jack's stomach twisted. He couldn't explain it, but he felt an overwhelming urge to protect this little being, to shield it from whatever shadows lurked nearby. "All right," he said, steeling himself. "Let's get it back to that light." As they turned toward the trees, a chilling breeze swept over them, making the leaves rattle like 1,000 warning whispers. Jack pulled his kids closer, casting one last glance over his shoulder. For a moment, he thought he saw a dark shape dart between the houses, but when he blinked, it was gone. He could feel the knot in his stomach tighten. Words escaped him as he gripped the pumpkin bucket with the tiny creature nestled inside. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing. They had to keep moving forward. The darkness of the night surrounded them, but he refused to let fear overtake him. With a deep breath, he took the first step into the unknown, determined to protect the little creature at all costs. And as he walked, he felt a glimmer of hope ignite within him, pushing him to continue on their journey. Chapter 2. Into the Woods. The glow pulsed in the distance like a silent beacon, casting strange shadows through the tree line. Jack gripped the pumpkin candy holder, the small alien inside clutching its tiny device with both trembling hands. Every few steps, the creature would glance back over its shoulder, its eyes wide with a fear so intense that Jack could feel the knot in his stomach tighten, a sensation growing within him like the pressure before a storm. Ben and Lucy trailed close behind, their candy forgotten. "Dad, are we sure this is safe?" Ben whispered, casting nervous glances into the darkness. The branches above seemed to twist and reach toward them, forming skeletal fingers against the sky. "I don't know, buddy," Jack admitted, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I don't think we can just leave it here. Look at it. It's terrified." They moved off the pavement, the soft grass giving way to hard-packed ground as they approached the woods. The noises of faraway trick-or-treaters faded into oblivion, leaving only the whisper of wind through leaves and the crunch of broken twigs beneath their feet. Jack could feel the creature's pulse pounding and its little body twitching against his hand. Whatever it feared was approaching, but he couldn't see or hear anything strange. As they walked, Lucy leaned over to get a closer look at the creature, her eyes wide with awe. "What do you think it is?" she asked, glancing up at Jack. "Do you think it's from space?" Jack hesitated, not wanting to scare her. "Maybe, honey, but whatever it is, it needs our help." Suddenly, the creature's gadget began to pulse faster, casting brief flashes of blue-green light onto the trees. The creature whimpered softly, pointing to the ground, then back at the light in the distance. It was trying to communicate something, but Jack couldn't understand. "What's it saying?" Ben asked, his voice a hushed whisper. He looked back nervously, as though he half expected to see something chasing them. "I'm not sure," Jack murmured, watching the creature closely. "But it's definitely trying to hurry us up." The sense of urgency was growing, a silent panic that seemed to swell within the creature's tiny frame. Its fur stood on end, and its eyes flickered with a strange, almost luminescent glow. They moved faster, weaving between the trees as they neared the pulsing light. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them, something unseen yet powerful enough to press its presence into the very air around them. He gripped the pumpkin tighter, his pulse echoing the creature's frantic beats. Just as they reached a small clearing, the creature chirped, pointing to a spot on the ground where scattered metallic fragments lay among the leaves. The remnants of what looked like a miniature craft lay half buried in the dirt, its sleek, silvery surface scorched and battered. The pulsing light was coming from within the wreckage, spilling out like a strange, ethereal mist. The creature chirped louder, scrabbling at the side of the pumpkin, its eyes wide with desperation. Jack knelt down, lowering the pumpkin to the ground, and watched as the alien scrambled out. It rushed to the remnants of its craft, pressing the small device against the hull. The light dimmed, then flared up again, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe around the clearing. "Dad," Lucy whispered, clutching his arm, "I think something's coming." Jack's gaze snapped toward the trees. For a heartbeat, he saw nothing but darkness. But then, something moved, a shadow within a shadow, too tall and too still, watching them from the edge of the clearing. "Stay behind me," Jack whispered, positioning himself between his kids and the unseen figure. He tried to control his breathing, but he could feel the creature's terror growing. It worked frantically, pressing buttons on its device, each beep and pulse echoing louder in the night. The figure stepped forward, its shape shifting in the moonlight, a tall, sinewy form cloaked in darkness. Jack could make out little, save for the impression of something unnaturally elongated. Limbs that seemed to stretch impossibly long, fingers that curved like claws. The creature let out a frightened squeak, its entire body trembling as it looked back at Jack, pleading silently. Jack's throat tightened, words lost as he realized with a jolt that this being wasn't merely curious or lost, it was hunting. And the little alien was its prey. "Kids, we need to move." "Now," Jack said, barely able to keep the panic from his voice. He took a step back, but the tall figure mirrored his movement, gliding closer. It moved with a silent, fluid grace, as though it wasn't bound by the same rules of nature. Jack's skin prickled with a cold sweat. "Run!" he whispered urgently, pulling Ben and Lucy back toward the path they'd come from. They dashed into the trees, the creature clinging to Jack's leg, its eyes squeezed shut in terror. They could hear the thing moving behind them, each step unnaturally light, barely disturbing the leaves. Lucy clutched Jack's hand, her breathing ragged. What is it?" "I don't know," he managed, glancing over his shoulder. The dark figure was still there, gliding through the trees, its form shifting like a shadow caught in the wind. Jack pushed forward, his heart pounding as they tore through the underbrush, back toward the faint glow of streetlights. The tiny creature crawled up Jack's leg to reach a jacket pocket. It hopped in. Eyes wide with trust and terror, peered over the pocket now. Just as they neared the edge of the woods, the alien's device let out a loud beep, echoing through the trees. The figure froze, its head tilting as though listening. Then, with a bone-chilling hiss, it melted back into the shadows, its presence vanishing like smoke on the wind. Jack stopped, gasping for breath, as he watched the spot where it had disappeared. Ben and Lucy clung to him, their faces pale in the moonlight. He reached down and gently lifted the tiny alien out of his coat pocket. Its heartbeat was frantic, its eyes shimmering with a gratitude that made his heart ache. "We're not safe yet," Jack murmured, glancing back toward the street. "Come on, we need to find somewhere to hide, just until morning." The alien nodded, holding up the gadget as it pointed toward the distant houses. Jack took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The weight of what he felt compelled to do nearly overwhelmed him. But whatever was out there, they'd have to stay ahead of it. Until dawn. Chapter 3: Seeking Shelter. The night air was thick with tension as Jack led his kids, and their peculiar new companion, toward the nearest house. The creature in his arms clung to him tightly, its wide eyes darting nervously back toward the woods. Jack couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if something ancient and insidious was lurking just out of sight, waiting for them to slip. Ben clutched his father's sleeve. "Dad, what if that thing follows us?" Jack shook his head, trying to reassure him. "We'll be fine, Ben," he added, though he wasn't entirely sure if that was true. But somehow, the streetlights felt safer, a boundary between their world and whatever darkness lay beyond. They hurried up the walkway to a nearby house with its porch light on, casting a warm, welcoming glow. Jack knocked, a steady, deliberate rap that he hoped wouldn't seem too frantic. The alien curled tighter in his arms, giving a quiet chirp that sounded almost like a whimper. Whatever it was, it had risked everything to come to them. A moment later, the door opened, and an elderly woman peered out, her eyes widening as she took in the small, disheveled group. "Oh my, are you all right? Out here alone at this hour?" Her voice was kind, but Jack sensed the hesitation in her gaze. "Sorry to bother you," he said, keeping his voice low. "We just got a little turned around in the woods. Would you mind if we waited here just for a few minutes?" The woman studied him for a moment before nodding. Come in. Halloween night can be full of surprises." She held the door open, and they slipped inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around them like a blanket. Jack felt as if an enormous weight had lifted as they crossed the threshold, putting a physical barrier between them and whatever lurked outside. They followed her into the cozy living room, where the scent of cinnamon and old books filled the air. She gestured for them to sit, her gaze lingering on the alien, which was now peeking out from Jack's arms, its large, anxious eyes darting around the room. "Well now, what a sweet little creature," she said slowly, tilting her head as if trying to place what exactly she was seeing. The creature blinked up at her, letting out a soft, almost musical chirp. Lucy leaned in, studying the alien's face. "It's not from around here, is it, Dad?" Her voice was a mix of awe and fear, her gaze filled with questions Jack couldn't yet answer. Jack managed to put on a slight smile. "No, honey, I don't think it is." The elderly woman's gaze softened, and she leaned forward, curiosity overriding her initial caution. "Is this little one lost? Seems like it's seen something frightening." "That's putting it lightly," Jack murmured, glancing down at the creature, which was clutching its gadget again, tapping a sequence of buttons. It emitted a faint, rhythmic beep that seemed to calm the creature. Though Jack noticed its eyes remained fixed on the window, it was on alert, its entire body tense with a need to escape, or to hide. The woman settled back in her chair, her gaze thoughtful. "Halloween has a way of bringing out strange things. Folk stories say the veil between worlds is thin tonight." She chuckled softly. "Used to be, we thought Halloween was all costumes and candy, but some say it's more than that." Lucy's eyes went wide, captivated by the woman's words. "Like ghosts and monsters?" The woman nodded, a twinkle in her eye. "Or visitors from far-off places, if you believe in such things." Her tone was playful, but Jack could tell she was serious, the weight of her words heavy with an unspoken knowledge. Suddenly, the gadget in the alien's grip emitted a shrill, panicked beep, its glow flickering like a warning. The creature tensed, clutching it tightly as it glanced toward the window. Jack felt the hair on the back of his neck prickle as he turned to look. Out on the lawn, beyond the circle of the porch light, a dark shape stood in the shadows, tall and motionless. It was the figure from the woods, its elongated limbs stretched impossibly long, its face obscured by shadows that seemed to cling to it, like darkness itself had taken form. Jack's voice was barely a whisper. "Don't look, kids. Just stay away from the window." The creature's chirping grew frantic, its small body shivering as it pointed toward the door, urging them to leave. Jack realized then that staying here was no longer safe. The thing outside wouldn't be held back by walls or doors. It had followed them across the boundary. The elderly woman seemed to understand. She rose quietly, her face pale but resolute. "Take the back door," she said softly. "I'll keep it distracted. Go on now, quickly." Jack hesitated, but her expression was firm, determined. "Go on," she urged, her voice a whisper. "Get that little one where it needs to be." With a nod, Jack motioned for Ben and Lucy to follow him. They slipped out through the back door, into the cool, silent night. The porch light cast a small pool of light around them, and Jack could feel the creature's grip tighten on his arm, its eyes darting nervously as they moved away from the house. As they crept across the backyard, they heard a quiet humming sound from the alien's equipment. This time, it issued a sequence of rapid beeps that sounded like a heartbeat and became louder with each passing second. The alien pointed excitedly at a hill outside the neighborhood. Jack noticed the faint shape of another glow there, dimmer but more consistent, like a signal to the thing. "Dad, what's it doing?" Ben asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I think it's telling us where to go," Jack replied, glancing down at the alien, which nodded vigorously, its tiny face alight with both fear and hope. They didn't have much time, and Jack knew it. As they approached the yard's edge, Jack threw a final glimpse back toward the house. The elderly woman stood at the front window, her silhouette against the light, waiting as the dark figure approached. She met Jack's gaze and nodded once before turning back to face the thing outside. Jack felt guilty and grateful, but he couldn't stop now. They darted across the street, heading toward the open field beyond the neighborhood. The pulsing light on the hill grew stronger as they neared, illuminating a small, cratered area hidden among the grass and trees. In the center of it, a sleek metallic structure lay half-buried, like a fallen star caught in the earth. The alien's craft. The creature chirped with relief, practically leaping from Jack's arms as it ran toward the tiny ship. But before they could reach it, a bone-chilling hiss echoed through the field. Jack turned, his blood running cold as he saw the shadowy figure gliding toward them across the grass, its elongated limbs stretched forward, reaching. The alien frantically tapped at the device, and a hatch on the ship slid open, revealing a warm, inviting glow inside. It turned back to Jack, chirping and motioning for them to follow. "Go!" Jack urged the kids, pushing them toward the barely big enough open hatch as the figure closed in, its movements impossibly fast, like shadows converging. As they squeezed into the ship, Jack glanced over his shoulder, watching as the figure stretched its long, dark limbs, reaching toward the hatch. The alien pressed a button, and the door slid shut just as the creature's claws scraped against the metal. Inside, they were safe, for now. Chapter 4. Unseen Pursuer. Inside the craft, which barely fit the three humans and the alien, the silence was almost unbearable, in stark contrast to the uncanny whispering of the outer world. Jack, Ben, and Lucy gathered close together, their breaths fogging up the small, dimly lighted room. The alien dashed to a panel on the far side, its small fingers moving with practiced speed across a succession of light buttons. The cabin filled with soft, pulsing light as screens came to life, revealing weird symbols and moving maps. Jack's heart still raced, his pulse loud in his ears. The nervous energy was relentless, as if the tension from outside had seeped into the very air within the ship. He cast a glance at his kids, noticing the same blend of fear and fascination in their eyes as they watched the alien work with fevered determination. Lucy leaned forward, her voice a breathless hush. "Dad, are we in a spaceship?" Jack nodded slowly. "I think so, honey. I think we're in its ship." Uncertainty knotted within him, a swirl of fear and wonder, leaving him almost speechless. The debris they found earlier must have been an escape pod. The alien paused, glancing back at them with wide, pleading eyes. It tapped a few buttons, and a holographic image flared to life in the center of the cabin. A brilliant, three-dimensional projection of a distant star system, planets whirling around a vivid blue sun. The creature pointed to one of the planets, a small, lush world bathed in green and blue light, rings shimmering like delicate threads. "That's where it's from?" Ben whispered, captivated. The alien nodded, touching the planet in the projection. Then, its gaze grew mournful as it pointed back to Earth in the hologram, as if highlighting the vast separation between home and here. It chirped urgently, gesturing to its homeworld, then to Earth, then to itself, and finally to the blinking device in its hand. Jack observed the creature's hurried gestures, piecing together its message. The alien's movements grew frantic, each gesture sharper, as if time were slipping through its fingers. "I think it's saying it crashed here," Jack murmured, glancing at his children. "And it needs to get back." The alien nodded, lifting its device to show Jack a series of flashing symbols, a countdown, ticking faster than he was comfortable with. Its gaze was pleading, a silent cry for help that tugged at his heart. Lucy leaned closer, watching the timer. "Is that counting down?" The alien hesitated, then nodded, its small body trembling. Jack's stomach twisted. Whatever was coming, it couldn't be good. "Dad, does that mean it's running out of time?" Ben's voice shook slightly, his face drawn in worry. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "I think so, buddy. And I think that's why it's so desperate. It needs to get its ship unstuck, or something bad will happen." The alien returned to the controls, fingers flying across the panel, trying to engage the engines. The ship emitted a low hum, shuddering as if straining against something. It let out a frustrated chirp, tapping the panel harder, but the ship remained grounded, its power only flickering on the display screen. Jack suddenly realized the situation. As they had climbed into the ship, he noticed a large, twisted, and broken tree limb that had snagged part of the ship's hull as it crashed, pinning it down under its weight. He turned to Ben and Lucy to explain what he noticed. "That's what's holding the ship in place. We need to find a way to move it if we're going to help." The alien, its eyes widening as it chirped in agreement. It gestured urgently at the countdown still flashing on its device, the numbers now moving alarmingly fast. "All right, everyone," Jack said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're going to need all the strength we have to free this ship. Ben, Lucy, stay close and be ready to pull when I say." The children nodded, determination sparking in their eyes as they positioned themselves by the tree limb. Jack took a deep breath, wrapping his hands around the rough bark. He could feel the limb's weight, its ancient strength now pinning the craft. But they had no other options. With the countdown ticking down, time was their enemy. "On 3, Jack said, feeling his own urgency rise to match the aliens. 1, 2, 3. They heaved together, muscles straining against the unyielding limb. The alien, too, added its small hands to the effort, chirping encouragement as they pushed and pulled. Slowly, they felt the it shift, giving slightly under their combined strength. Jack gritted his teeth, every fiber in his body straining as he pulled with all his might. Finally, with a loud snap, the limb broke loose, its hold on the ship's hull releasing. They stumbled back as the ship shuddered, now free from its earthy prison. The alien chirped in relief, rushing back to the control panel. It tapped furiously at the buttons, and a deep, resonant hum filled the cabin as the ship's engines began to power up, finally unhindered. But before they could catch their breath, a low hiss could be heard over the hum of the craft. Jack whipped around, his heart pounding as he spotted the shadowy figure at the edge of the clearing. Its eyes glowed in the dark, and its elongated limbs stretched out, reaching as it began to move toward them. "Get back inside," Jack shouted, pulling Ben and Lucy to the safety of the ship's hatchway. The alien's eyes widened in terror as it clutched its device, tapping furiously to expedite the ship's systems. The figure moved faster now, gliding across the ground with a disquieting grace, its shadow stretching long and ominous under the faint glow of the ship's engines. Jack could feel the creature's intent, a dark presence closing in as it quickened its pace, reaching out. With a jolt, the ship lifted a few inches off the ground, hovering as the engines finally powered up to full capacity. The alien chirped with relief, adjusting the controls as the vessel began to rise. Outside, the figure let out a frustrated hiss, its long, dark fingers clawing at the air as the ship ascended, lifting higher and higher. As they broke through the treetops, Jack watched the creature recede, its shadow fading as it melted back into the darkness below. The alien turned to Jack, its face awash in gratitude. It pressed a button on its device, filling the cabin with a soft, calming hum that resonated through the quiet space like a gentle lullaby. Jack exhaled, his pulse finally slowing as the ship climbed into the safety of the night sky, leaving the unseen pursuer and its dark presence far below. Chapter 5: A Glimpse of Home. The craft hummed softly as it ascended, the lights of the town shrinking below, and with it, the shadowy figure that had pursued them. For the first time, Jack felt a strange peace settle over him, the rush of fear finally ebbing as they left the earth behind. The cabin lights dimmed to a warm glow, and a stillness fell over the family as they looked at their surroundings. Alien, surreal, yet somehow comforting. The alien, now visibly calmer, turned to face them. Its large, expressive eyes held a gratitude so deep that Jack felt his own apprehension soften, replaced by a strange protectiveness. The creature reached out, touching a panel on the wall. Instantly, a new holographic image materialized, an ethereal view of the stars, the galaxies spiraling in slow, majestic movements around them. Jack watched, entranced, as the alien pointed to a cluster of stars. Then, as if with some hidden power, it projected a close-up of one particular planet, spinning in the middle of the projection. It was a serene place, covered in lush forests and sapphire oceans. Glimmering cities dotted the landscape, their lights shimmering like beacons. Ben's voice broke the silence, soft and filled with awe. Is that where you're from?" The alien nodded and waved toward the planet, its expression changing from nostalgia to grief. Jack noticed tears welling up in his eyes, which blinked before returning their focus to the family. The alien touched the projection again, and it zoomed out to reveal another planet in the same solar system. Unlike the previous, this one was enveloped in darkness, with menacing clouds swirling like smoke. Lucy shuddered, sliding closer to her father. "That one, it looks scary." The alien's gaze darkened as it tapped the dark planet. A series of images flickered to life in rapid succession, towering shadows, creatures with twisted limbs and glaring eyes, dark cities built on rocky outcrops under a blood-red sky. The creature looked at Jack, then at Ben and Lucy, its eyes filled with a mixture of fear and urgency. I think it's telling us about its enemy," Jack whispered, feeling a chill run through him. The alien nodded, its expression confirming his guess. With a trembling hand, it pressed another button on its device, displaying the same shadowy figure they'd encountered on Earth. The image was stark, revealing more detail than they'd seen in the dark. A creature with elongated limbs, spindly and dark, its skin a sickly gray, eyes sunken and filled with an eerie, predatory gleam. Its fingers stretched to claws, its body contorted, almost smoke-like, as though it were a shadow given form. Ben took a step back, his eyes wide. That's the thing that was chasing us, isn't it?" The alien nodded, its gaze filled with fear and exhaustion. It pressed another button, bringing up a series of strange symbols next to the creature's image. It gestured to itself, then pointed at the creature in the projection, and back to the timer on its device, now ticking at a slower pace, though the numbers continued their ominous countdown. Jack's mind raced as he tried to piece it together. Wait. Does it need you? For something? Is that why it was following you? The alien's expression was somber, almost resigned as it nodded. Jack noticed the weight of that gesture, the sadness that seemed to cling to its every movement. It was a creature that had been running, fleeing from something relentless. And the countdown. The thought clicked in Jack's mind like a bolt of lightning. It's tracking you, isn't it? He asked softly, his voice tinged with realization. That creature, it's following your signal, and it'll keep hunting you down as long as it has, whatever that is. He pointed at the timer on the alien's device, which continued its relentless countdown. The alien's face fell, confirming Jack's worst fears. It chirped softly, almost apologetically, and pointed at a red button on the panel near the front of the ship. Then, as if steeling itself for what it was about to reveal, it pointed at Jack, then at the children, and back at the button. Lucy's voice was a small, frightened whisper. Dad, I think it's asking us to help. Stop that creature. Jack felt his throat tighten. The alien wasn't just asking for help, it was asking for protection, for a chance to finally escape the endless pursuit. He glanced at the kids, then back at the alien, his mind torn between the fear of their own safety and the responsibility he felt to help this creature. All right, he said softly, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. If we're going to help, we'll need to know what to do. How do we stop it? The alien's eyes widened with relief and hope. It pointed back to the dark planet, then to a small vial it had extracted from a compartment on its device. The vial glowed faintly, filled with a shimmering liquid that seemed to pulsate with a strange golden light. The creature chirped, tapping the vial, then pointing to the projection of the shadowy figure. Jack understood. It needed to use this vial somehow to counteract or weaken the creature's power. But as he studied the alien's expression, he realized there was a catch. You're saying, you can't do it alone, right? Jack guessed. The alien nodded solemnly, looking at them with an expression of hope tinged with apology. The realization hit Jack like a cold wave. This wasn't just a passenger seeking shelter. It was a being on the run from a hunter. And that hunter would stop at nothing until it captured its prey. Ben looked up, his young face resolute. We can help, Dad. We have to. Look at him. He's all alone. Lucy nodded, stepping forward, her small hand reaching out to touch the alien's. We won't let it get you. Right, Dad? Jack felt a fierce protectiveness surge within him. He had no idea what they were up against, but he knew they couldn't abandon this creature to its fate. The alien's face softened, and it chirped in quiet appreciation, clutching the vial as if it were its last hope. It reached over to the red button, placing its tiny hand beside Jack's, its gaze meeting his with a question, as if asking for permission to start whatever plan it had in mind. Jack took a deep breath, glancing at his kids, who both nodded in silent agreement. Together, they pressed the button, and the ship shifted, its lights dimming and changing to a deep blue hue. The alien touched a series of symbols on the panel, and the countdown began to tick faster, an ominous beat against the stillness of the cabin. The projection of the shadowy creature began to move, as if sensing their actions from across the cosmos. Jack felt his skin prickle as he watched it react, its dark eyes narrowing, its form twisting with an unnatural fluidity. The alien turned to Jack and his children, offering a final, grateful nod. Then, with a fierce determination, It pressed the vial against the projection, activating whatever power it held. A low, powerful hum filled the cabin, the alien's homeworld shining brighter in the hologram as the creature's shadowed planet began to fade, its dark clouds breaking apart like smoke dissolving in light. As the hum grew louder, Jack felt a strange energy envelop them, a warmth that settled over the cabin, filling it with a sense of peace. He glanced at the alien, whose gaze held a quiet relief, as if it could finally rest. Outside, the shadow creature, miles below on the surface, let out one final furious scream, its form unraveling as the energy washed over it. The ship shuddered, and then, silence. The hologram dimmed, the image of the dark planet fading into nothingness. Jack let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The alien leaned back, exhausted but finally at peace. Its eyes met Jack's, offering a small, tired smile. In that moment, Jack knew their strange passenger's journey was finally over. They had faced the darkness and emerged together, bound by a promise made in a night filled with shadows and stars. Chapter 6: Bonds Across Worlds. The cabin lay in a tranquil stillness, the faint glow from the control panel casting gentle, undulating shadows across the family. Outside, the stars shimmered in the vast silence of space, indifferent to the weight of their journey. They hung like ancient distant sentinels, bright and unfaltering, a quiet reminder of the battle between light and darkness they had just witnessed, a conflict fought in absolute silence among the stars. Jack sat in a small, curved seat beside the alien, trying to understand everything that had happened in just a few hours. It was as if the bounds of his world had grown and altered, leaving him excited and disoriented. Ben and Lucy gathered close on a bench in the back, their faces soaked in the ship's ambient light, watching the alien with calm astonishment and empathy. Jack cast a glance at the small thing beside him. Its little frame, bathed in lovely light, slumped from tiredness. Its wide eyes, half closed, reflected a tired contentment, as if it could finally relax in their presence. The alien tilted its head, meeting Jack's gaze with a look of calm gratitude. With a gentle chirp, it tapped a button on its gadget, and the familiar hologram appeared, filling the cabin with a soft glow. This time, the image was different. The dark planet, the source of its fears, and the predatory creature they had encountered were gone. In their place, only a single world remained, suspended in the hologram's gentle light. The alien's home hung there like a serene jewel, suspended in the vastness of space, its blue-green hues swirling with clouds and seas, its surface dotted with small, shimmering lights like stars cast on land. The alien pointed to the planet, then turned back to Jack, its expression filled with quiet, unspoken hope. "You want us to help you get home, don't you?" Jack asked, his voice soft but steady, a kind of commitment forming with the words. The alien nodded, its face brightening with a mixture of hope and gratitude. It was a simple gesture, but Jack could sense the depth of emotion it carried, the creature's desire to return, the need to see its family, its world, once more. Ben leaned forward, curiosity softening his voice. "How far away is it?" With a few more taps, the alien zoomed out the hologram to show the scale of distance separating Earth from its world, a distance so staggering that Jack found himself struggling to comprehend it. The creature's world lay far beyond the Milky Way, nestled in the heart of a distant galaxy, unreachable by any human technology. It was a place out of sight, but not out of mind. The alien's gaze lingered on the display, its expression tinged with sadness as it looked back at them. Jack understood the sadness. It was the sorrow of knowing how far it had come, yet how impossible the journey seemed on its own. Lucy reached out, resting a comforting hand on the alien's arm. "But you made it this far. We can figure it out. Right, Dad?" Her gaze flicked to Jack, her words carrying both hope and the weight of a plea for their new friend. Jack hesitated, his mind racing over the countless challenges that lay ahead. But as he looked at the creature's face, so filled with quiet courage and an unyielding hope, he felt a resolve bloom within him. "We'll try, honey," he said, his voice growing more certain. "Somehow we'll figure it out." The alien chirped softly, clutching the vial it had held since their encounter with the shadowy figure. The vial glowed faintly, a soft light emanating from within. It offered the small vial to Jack, a symbolic gesture that went beyond words, as if offering him a piece of its journey. In its silent way, the alien was entrusting Jack with something precious, a testament to the bond they had forged through fear, courage, and an unwavering commitment to survival. Jack accepted the vial, feeling its warmth pulse gently against his skin, and nodded. "We'll keep this safe for you," he said, the words carrying a promise he didn't yet fully understand. The alien gave a small nod, leaning back with a long, slow sigh, its eyes drifting shut as it finally allowed itself to rest, knowing it was in safe hands. For a moment, a deep, peaceful silence filled the cabin, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. Ben looked up at Jack, his expression earnest. "Dad, do you think it'll ever see its family again?" Jack felt his heart tighten as he looked at the hologram of the alien's distant world. "I hope so, buddy," he replied, a mixture of determination and quiet sadness in his voice. "But we're going to do our best to make sure it has that chance." At his words, the alien stirred, its eyes half opening, a flicker of hope lighting up its weary face. It gestured toward a storage compartment near the back of the cabin, pointing with a small, hesitant hand. Jack rose, moving to the compartment and pulling it open to reveal a collection of small, translucent crystals. Each crystal held a faint inner glow, as if alive with its own quiet energy. The alien reached out, tapping one of the larger crystals and pointing toward the ship's controls, chirping softly in its musical language. Lucy tilted her head, her eyes widening. Are those fuel?" The alien nodded, letting out a soft chirp of confirmation. Taking one of the larger crystals, it held it up to a slot on the control panel, pressing it into place. The crystal began to glow brighter, casting a warm light throughout the cabin as the ship's systems hummed to life, renewed with the faint but steady power of the crystal. Ben leaned closer to the panel, curiosity overcoming his tiredness. "So, does this mean it's ready to go? It has enough fuel now?" The alien's expression turned somber. It nodded, then pointed to a smaller crystal in the compartment, tapping it and making a small, almost mournful sound. Jack understood immediately. The larger crystal could only take it part way, a short journey through nearby space, but not enough to complete the trek home. It was enough to keep the ship running, but not enough to bridge the vast gulf separating it from its world. Jack's heart sank as he realized the depth of the creature's plight. They had only solved part of the problem, a temporary solution at best. Yet, seeing the alien's hopeful face, he knew he couldn't simply leave it adrift in space, stranded somewhere between here and the stars. "We'll figure something out," he said, his voice firm, laced with a quiet determination. "Maybe there's someone who can help us, someone with the technology to bridge the distance." He glanced back at the alien, who watched him with a look of trust that cut straight to his core. "Or maybe we'll find a way on Earth to give you what you need to get back." The alien looked at him with gratitude shining in its tired eyes, a glimmer of relief softening its expression. It chirped a question, pointing toward the hologram of Earth as if to ask if they, too, had families waiting for them. Jack felt a gentle warmth stir within him, and he nodded, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. "Yes, we do," he said softly. "And tonight, I think you're a part of ours." Lucy leaned against Jack's side, her eyes soft as she looked at the creature. "We're like a team now, right? We help each other." The alien's face softened, its eyes warm as it reached out with its small hand, which Jack took, feeling the quiet resilience radiating from this small, courageous being. In that moment, Jack realized they were bound by something greater than themselves, an unspoken promise to protect each other, whatever it took. After a moment, the alien rose, gesturing toward the control panel, and began to enter coordinates, its movements slow but precise. Jack noticed the faint shimmer of hope in its eyes as it worked, carefully plotting a path that would take it into a safe orbit around Earth, where they could wait until a solution revealed itself. When it finished, the alien turned to them, its gaze asking a silent question, a hope for permission. Jack hesitated, glancing at Ben and Lucy, both of whom nodded with solemn determination. "We'll stay with you as far as we can," Jack said, his voice steady. "You're not alone." The alien chirped, a soft, heartfelt sound, and pressed a button to start the ship's engines. The cabin hummed with renewed life as the stars outside began to shift, growing brighter as they drifted further from Earth. As they flew, the alien tapped another button on its device, bringing up a series of images, moments and memories captured like snapshots from a distant world. The images glowed softly, filling the cabin with a warmth that seemed to transcend language. Jack watched as scenes unfolded. Towering cities built on lush landscapes, vibrant sunlit skies, the alien's family, a group of beings who looked just like it, their eyes filled with love and familiarity. It was a glimpse into a life far removed from his own, yet strangely familiar in its beauty and simplicity. Jack felt his heart ache with empathy, a silent promise forming within him, a vow that he would do everything in his power to help this creature find its way back to those it loved. As Earth grew smaller behind them, a new resolve filled the cabin. They were a team now, bound together by a shared journey, and no matter how strange or impossible it seemed, they would find a way to get their friend home. Chapter 7. Descent. The ship began to hum softly as they prepared to descend, its small thrusters warming up, guiding them back toward the outskirts of Earth. Jack couldn't shake the bittersweet feeling in his chest as they drew closer, watching the blue-green planet grow larger in the viewport. They were going back to Earth, but he knew that for their friend, this was only a temporary rest stop. Jack held on to the alien's hand, feeling a fierce sense of protectiveness that he couldn't fully explain. Ben looked up, his face filled with a mix of anticipation and concern. "Dad, are we really just going to drop it off and go home?" Jack placed a reassuring hand on Ben's shoulder. "We're not done yet, buddy. But we'll find a way to help it get back to its family." The alien chirped softly, the sound warm and filled with trust. Jack could feel the creature's appreciation radiate from it like warmth on a cold night. But then, just as they were starting their descent, the ship jolted, the lights flickering as an alarm beeped on the control panel. The alien scrambled to the controls, its face tightening with worry. It pressed a series of buttons, glancing back at Jack with a look of urgent panic. The ship's thrusters were flickering erratically. The descent had become unstable. "Dad, what's happening?" Ben asked, his voice quivering. Jack studied the alien's movements, noting the anxiety in its expression. It was struggling to stabilize the ship, its hands flying over the controls, but the trajectory display showed a path spiraling out of control. They were falling out of orbit, Earth's gravitational pull dragging them in faster than the ship could adjust. "We're descending too quickly," Jack murmured, trying to stay calm. "The ship, it doesn't have enough power to keep us steady." Lucy's face went pale. "Are we crashing?" The alien chirped in distress, pointing at a small, flashing icon on the display. Its fuel reserves had dropped to critical levels, enough to guide them to a landing, but not enough to maintain stability. Jack felt the dread settle in the pit of his stomach, his mind racing as he tried to think of a plan. All right, we'll have to land, but somewhere safe. We can't risk attracting attention. Maybe near the forest, where we first met? The alien nodded, its gaze determined as it changed course, taking them to the familiar stretch of forest outside their neighborhood. The hologram revealed a precise location, and the engines hummed louder as they tried to control their descent. However, as they broke through the atmosphere, the cabin began to shake violently, with the ship's hull moaning under the strain. Ben and Lucy clung to their seats, their faces a mixture of fear and resolve, as the ship's altitude dropped rapidly. Jack held onto the alien, whispering reassurances, though his own heart thundered in his chest. Outside, the glow of re-entry flared, casting the cabin in eerie flashes of light and shadow. The forest appeared on the horizon, dark trees reaching up like skeletal arms. The alien adjusted the controls with a fierce precision, steering them toward an open clearing beyond the tree line. Jack held his breath, feeling the ground race toward them. With a final lurch, the ship touched down, the landing rough but steady. A tense silence followed as the engines powered down, leaving only the sound of their breaths and the faint hum of the control panel. Ben let out a breath he'd been holding, his voice filled with relief. We made it. Jack nodded, rubbing a hand over his face as he felt the weight of the journey settle over him. Yeah, for now. The alien let out a weary chirp, slumping against the control panel. Its small body seemed to sag with relief, its expression one of quiet pride, as if it had just accomplished a great feat. Jack could feel its gratitude radiating from it, a warmth that softened the tension in the cabin. As they prepared to step outside, Jack felt a new wave of realization settle over him. They were back on Earth, but their friend's journey was far from over. Without additional fuel, it couldn't leave again. They were at a crossroads, facing a choice. Lucy looked up at Jack, her eyes filled with quiet determination. Dad, we can't just let it go. We have to help, even if it means asking for help. Jack's mind raced with conflicting thoughts, torn between the instinct to protect their friend and the risks that came with revealing the truth. But as he looked at the alien's exhausted face, he knew they couldn't do this alone. You're right, he said finally, feeling a strange sense of relief at the decision. We'll find someone, people who can help us figure out how to get it home. The alien's expression softened as it looked at them, gratitude shining in its tired eyes. It seemed willing to follow wherever they led, trusting them completely. Outside, the cool air grounded them as they stepped into the clearing. The stars shimmered overhead, vast and silent, and Jack felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. They were a team, a family of sorts, and whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The woodland remained silent around them, bearing witness to the small, huddled party emerging from the alien ship. Jack held the alien close as it clung to him, its gaze darting between the dark trees. The faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl reminded them they were back on Earth. Yet, in the quiet, they were bound by a commitment to help their friend find his way home. Ben and Lucy looked up at their father, eyes bright with determination. How do we find people who can help? Ben whispered, as if afraid to disturb the night's fragile peace. Jack took a deep breath, running his fingers through his hair as he thought. Well, we need someone who'd understand without panicking or seeing it as a threat. He glanced down at the alien, whose tired but trusting gaze met his. Maybe we start with a university or a scientist. We'll need to be careful with how we explain this. Lucy piped up, What about that science lab near town? The one with the observatory? Jack's mind sparked with hope. The lab on the outskirts had an observatory and a team of researchers, some specializing in astrophysics. He knew they'd be cautious, though convincing them to help might still be a challenge. "That might just work," he said, nodding. "We can start there. Maybe they'll know how to communicate across the stars." The alien chirped softly, a note of relief in its voice. It sensed they were committed to its journey, no matter the risks. Jack felt his heart warm as he watched it. Their strange friend had shown them resilience and hope that stretched across worlds. They moved quietly through the dark streets, guiding the alien along as they kept to the shadows. The observatory was a fair distance, on the town's outskirts where the streetlights faded. The walk was quiet, broken only by occasional sounds of Halloween trick-or-treaters, a strange reminder of the night that had set this journey in motion. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the iron gates of the observatory, nestled in a grove of trees on a hill overlooking the town. The stars gleamed above them, bright and watchful, as if bearing witness to their mission. Jack took a deep breath, gripping the alien's hand gently. "All right," he murmured. "Let's go make contact." He led them up the narrow path toward the entrance, faintly lit by a single yellow-tinted bulb. To Jack's relief, he spotted Dr. Emily Lawson. He had graduated high school with her, back in the day. She was truly one of his oldest and dearest friends. Now, she had returned to their quaint hometown as a respected scientist, running the observatory. She had keys in her hand and appeared to be locking up for the night. "Dr. Lawson," he called softly, trying to sound calm. "Jack?" She squinted at him in the dim light, a mix of confusion and concern. "What are you doing here? And with the kids?" It's a long story," Jack began, glancing down at the alien peeking from behind his leg. "We found someone who needs your help." Dr. Lawson's gaze followed his, landing on the alien, her eyes widening. She took a step back, hands clenching in surprise. "What is that?" "It's from somewhere else," Jack said carefully. "And it needs to get back. We're way out of our element here. Think you could help?" Dr. Lawson's face softened as she studied the creature, her curiosity and compassion outweighing her initial shock. She knelt, meeting the alien's gaze, her voice gentle. "Well, it's certainly unique. I'd be honored to help if I can." The alien chirped in gratitude, its eyes shining with relief. Dr. Lawson straightened, gesturing for them to follow her inside. "Come on, let's get you all out of the cold." They followed her through the narrow hallway to a large lab filled with telescopes, computer monitors, and stacks of notebooks. Dr. Lawson pulled up a chair, offering the alien a seat, and began taking notes as Jack explained everything that had happened. "I don't know how much time it has," Jack finished, "but it has to get back soon, or it won't survive the journey. We certainly have no idea what kind of fuel powers its ship." Dr. Lawson nodded thoughtfully, her brow furrowed. "It sounds like a specific energy source, but we might be able to create a substitute. I'll contact colleagues who specialize in dark energy and wormhole theory. They might know how to harness a substitute fuel." She looked at the alien, her face kind. "I can't promise anything, but I'll do everything I can." The alien let out a soft, grateful chirp, extending its tiny hand toward Dr. Lawson. She took it with a gentle smile, touched by the creature's trust. Lucy watched the exchange, her face beaming. "Does that mean we'll get to send it home?" Dr. Lawson smiled, nodding. "With some luck, yes. It's a big task, but your friend's bravery got it this far. We'll find a way to help it the rest of the way." Chapter 8. Racing Against the Stars. The alien looked around the lab, its gaze lingering on the stars visible through the observatory dome, eyes filled with longing and gratitude. Jack could feel the weight of the journey lifting from them all, replaced by a quiet peace that filled the room. The quiet tension in the observatory thickened as Jack, Ben, Lucy, and the alien settled in Dr. Lawson's lab. They were able to learn what the figures on the timer meant. 48 hours until something bad was going to happen to the ship and leave the little alien marooned forever. The alien's wide, shimmering eyes took in the bustling scientists, a mix of hope and urgency mirrored in its gaze. Jack felt the mission's weight pressing on his shoulders. Dr. Lawson, normally so composed, was in a near frenzy, scrawling equations across whiteboards and making urgent calls to her colleagues. Within hours, more people arrived, each carrying crates of specialized equipment, everything from rare metals to experimental energy amplifiers, all delivered under the cover of night. As each hour ticked by, Jack noticed the alien growing more agitated, glancing frequently over its shoulder as though sensing something lurking beyond the lab's walls. Shadows seemed to flicker along the observatory's edges, darker than the night sky. "Dad," Ben whispered, his eyes wide, "do you think those things that were after it are still out there?" Jack wrapped an arm around his son. "I don't know, Ben, but if they are, we won't let them near our friend." By the time Dr. Lawson gathered everyone for an update, her face was drawn and serious. "The alien ship has almost no energy left. Without an alternative fuel, its life support will fail in less than 24 hours, she said gravely. Lucy's hand shot to her mouth, her eyes welling up. "We can't let it happen, Dr. Lawson. We promised we'd help," she whispered. Dr. Lawson nodded, touched by Lucy's earnestness. "And we will. We've narrowed our options to one. We're going to create a temporary wormhole. It's risky. If our calculations are off, it could collapse mid-transit, but it's the only shot we have." The hours ticked by. Final preparations began. Dr. Lawson's team, working with the alien, constructed a makeshift wormhole generator, combining its technology with Earth equipment. A faint glow emanated from the generator as they wired it together, using everything from rare minerals to experimental crystals brought in by Dr. Lawson's colleague, Dr. May. However, just as they were about to test the full power sequence, a red light flared on the console, followed by a piercing alarm. "Error in the stabilizer sequence," Dr. May called out. "If we can't stabilize it, the portal will collapse before it fully opens." Another scientist, Dr. Howard, burst in with a canister of shimmering liquid. "I have something experimental, a superconductor. It might hold the portal long enough for a one-way transit." Dr. Lawson grabbed the canister, eyes fierce. "Hook it up. Let's give this our best shot." As the scientists connected the canister, the machine hummed to life, its glow intensifying until the whole observatory was bathed in a blue, ethereal light. Jack felt the device's power vibrating through the floor, but as the portal neared full power, the alien suddenly turned toward the window, its body tense with alarm. Shadows slid across the dome's far side, indistinct figures moving in the darkness, encircling the observatory like silent predators. Ben and Lucy clutched each other, faces pale. "Dad, what if it's them?" Jack's heart pounded as he turned to Dr. Lawson. "How much longer?" "Less than 2 minutes," she replied, her voice low and tense. "Once it opens, it won't stay stable for long." The alien let out fearful chirps, pointing toward the window. Outside, the shadows grew more defined, dark, smoky forms moving with purpose. Nothing that the little alien could do about that now, as he climbed aboard his ship, which he had flown in through the open observatory doors while the scientists worked. As the final seconds ticked down, the portal generator hummed louder, building to a crescendo. The swirling light coalesced into a shimmering gateway, casting long shadows. Dr. Lawson looked at Jack and the children, her face determined. "This is it. You'll have 60 seconds. Any longer, and it'll collapse." The alien looked back through the ship's window at Jack, Ben, and Lucy, its eyes filled with gratitude and understanding. It chirped one last time, As Jack looked at the glowing crystal in his hand that the alien had given him before boarding his ship, which pulsed with soft light, filling him with warmth. "This is a thank you," he murmured, realizing the depth of the gesture. "We won't forget you. You've been so brave. It's time to go home." The ship powered up and glided toward the portal, the brilliant light casting its small, determined silhouette across the floor. Just as it was about to step through, a loud bang echoed from the power source, sending sparks flying as the machine faltered, the portal flickering. A shadowy figure outside pressed against the glass, hissing as it slipped inside, as though made of smoke. "Portal's destabilizing!" Dr. May shouted. "Hold it steady, or it'll close." Acting on instinct, Jack leapt forward, grabbing a sparking wire and pressing it against the generator's casing. A painful jolt surged through him, but he held firm. "Go!" he yelled to the alien. "Now!" At that moment, the shadow loomed, reaching dark tendrils toward the alien, but before it could make contact, the ship slid into the portal. It disappeared into the light, and with a final thunderous crack, the portal collapsed, sending out a shockwave that knocked everyone off their feet. For a long moment, the observatory was silent. Jack let go of the wire, hand numb, and stumbled backward. Ben and Lucy clung to him, processing the farewell they'd just witnessed. Dr. Lawson slowly stood, looking around at the shattered equipment and burnt wires, exhausted but triumphant. "It's over," she murmured, her voice thick with relief. "Your friend. It made it." Jack nodded, his gaze lingering on the crystal the alien had placed in his hand. Its glow was warm, pulsing gently, like a heartbeat. As he looked closer, emotions welled up. He turned to the children beside him, who stared at the crystal, awe mingling with sorrow in their wide, tear-bright eyes. "We did it," he whispered. "And it left us something, a memory." They stood together in fragile silence, looking up through the observatory's open dome. Above them, stars shimmered against the black sky, countless pinpoints of light scattered across the vast unknown. Somewhere out there, their friend was safe, a tiny spark in the endless darkness, forever bound to the family who had risked everything to see it safely home. As they began to leave, Jack paused, glancing down once more at the crystal, glowing softly in his palm. It felt alive, as though it held a fragment of the alien's spirit, a message of thanks. He closed his fingers around it, feeling its warmth seep into his skin. A reminder of the bond they'd shared, a bond that defied time, space, and the impossible odds they'd faced together. This Halloween night, etched deep within their hearts, would be one they'd carry with them always. A night when the veil between worlds lifted, allowing them a glimpse of true friendship transcending space and time. One that they will all treasure, forever.